Hi everyone, it's Nono here in one more live stream. If you're new, these are live streams that I do normally weekly on creative coding and machine intelligence. Today's stream is going to be slightly different of what we've been doing lately. I'm gonna use this time to work on a side project. I'm looking forward to do this more and more because I tend not to find enough time to work on these projects, or maybe because I want to share the process and also involve the community in these projects just to see what other people think or if they have ideas on how it could be developed, and also to unveil the technologies that I'm using or I'm playing with today in these side projects. As always, I would really appreciate if you let me know if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay, and if you say hi on the chat and let me know that you're there, right? And you can join the Discord community at None of the Masas Discord. You can ask questions. You can also add questions on the chat or just write a comment on the video if you're watching this offline. So yeah, I think this is it for an intro. Today there's not going to be too much content. I'm going to show some things of what we did last week, just to give you a teaser in case you missed the live stream and you want to go back to that one, and share a little announcement and there. Okay, so I'm still I will say this repeatedly over the next months, I guess. I'm trying to get used to the Stream Deck to add notes to the, not notes, but add markers, create markers of live streams as I record. It's a bit hard because it's really easy to forget to click some of these buttons that I've set up. And also it's really easy to mess it up sometimes, right? So yeah, as I said, without further ado, let's take a look at what we saw last week and what we're gonna do today. All right, last week we took a look, actually it was like just 3 days ago on Friday, we took a look at DALLE, at the API. I tried to do this live stream also on Thursday, but it didn't quite work, so I repeated on Friday. This is my first approach online to DALLE's API. So OpenAI has released this Image API, as they call it, that offers 3 machine learning methods to generate images. And those 3 are not just to generate images from scratch, but also to edit existing images, and another one to just create variations from an existing image. So you input an image and it tries to generate others that look similar but not quite. All right, so this is an example of one of the generations. It was a 256 by 256 image. I just input an oil painting of a lighthouse by the sea with a blue sky and a few white clouds in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, drawn by Edward Hopper. And I chose that it would return 10 images, and I sent the request. So this was 1 out of 10 images that I got with that request. And the other, one of the other tests we did, because we tested different methods on the API multiple times, so you can go watch that at, as you can see in here, none of the mass/live/87. That's a short URL for that stream. And this, probably more interesting, was me downloading what you can see on the left is an artwork from the 1920s, I believe, by Edward Hopper, so Cape Elizabeth lighthouse. And just by inputting that image together with the input mask and the prompt, you get what you see on the right here. To deconstruct a bit, the input image is just the image you can see with the black parts is a square image, an input mask with the same size, leaving in black or non-transparent. It doesn't need to be black, but non-transparent, the areas that we don't want, that we want to conserve as they are on the image. And then in the alpha mask, everything has to be transparent for the parts that you want to be modified, right? So if we look at these parts, so this black part, this pier and the area of the house would be here, here, and here. And actually that's been filled to complete the image, but also with the context that we put on this prompt that says a lighthouse with blue sky and green and a green mountain next to a terracotta castle from Game of Thrones and dragons flying in the sky. More or less, it fulfills the prompt that we're asking it to create, but it's not exactly what I had imagined. But there are many other things that you could have done. And also, he's probably not online at the moment, but I will repeat this a few more times over the live stream. I want to congratulate a really good friend, Jose Luis Garcia El Castillo of ParametricCamp, because he just reached 10,000 subscribers. So this is really, really fresh news because this just happened today. And I think that's impressive. Thanks, I guess, to everyone who's supporting his channel, and also to him because he's putting out really, really good content for the community of creative computational designers and people who want to do code, but also be creative with it, right? Designers that come into programming and many other things. I will point you to his channel. I'm going to put it on the chat. So congrats, Jose Luis Garcia del Castillo, for 10K subscribers on ParametricCamp. And I'm going to put a link to the channel, which is https youtube.com/ and then at ParametricCamp. All right. And yeah, that's it for this. I'm going to pass now to today's content. Is going to be, as I said before, just working on the Note Parser on this side project. And I want to get started right now. So hi everyone, this is Nono here, and this is a working session or a work session of Note Parser. This is a side project that tries to do a text-based calculator or graphing app. You're going to see more of what this is in a second. And yeah, if you are excited about this project, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and make sure to subscribe and click on the bell if you want to get notified when I go live next or when I upload new videos. All right, without further ado, let's get started. I think this is good for an intro today. And yeah, we're gonna get to do some React TypeScript coding today. Okay, so maybe before we get this started, I'm going to show a few things that I want to do. So maybe this is for the topics of the application. So I'm tempted to do this now, but let's actually get started. So I'm gonna leave here a comment on the chat, so on Discord, that is gonna be simply a to-do, that is add the microcontrollers, and so here to do, add TF Lite on iOS, Task Vision, and TensorFlow for microcontrollers to topics.nono.ma. Reminder. All right, so this is going to be a reminder for myself, and I'll do that later. So let's close this here and let's continue with Note Parser. What is Note Parser? Note Parser is a plain text parser, which is in really early stages, as you can read here. It's a pet project I have been conceiving or trying to do for 10 years or more. This is like a really long effort. And the long story short, if we start actually from what is already there, if I go here, I have an npm project already that is based on some of the projects that we've done before with TypeScript and ESBuild and the create-serve library. So these are things that are already on the live stream that we've seen. But what you need to know is that we have an application in which we can type as if this was a notepad, right? So this is a text-based editor, and which actually has what you see is what you get. Like it has TipTap on the back end. We can see more about it in a second. And my intention here is that as we type, there is information that is being parsed from this node and shown on the right. This is more for debugging purposes at the moment, but the idea is that we get some understanding that, for example, in here, what we care about is that we spent 34 euros in the 3rd of November of 2022, right? So this is a way that in which you, if I, copy or just move this below, the gist here is that I can write a year, I can write here a month, for example, February, and I can put here a date, and I can put here an expense, for instance, right? So we can say we went to the supermarket, and these are going to be just all dummy expenses, just because this is just for debugging purposes. And here what you can see, what I think is interesting in this editor that we have here, is that we can see that the parser understood that 2022 is a year, so it shows here. February is a month, so it just shows the shorthand for February, and then 18th is a day, so it knows that is the 18th of February of 2022, and it shows it here by showing that date. Then what it knows is that there is expense here that costed 125 euros, and that expense is going to automatically be included in the date above it. So if I were to, for example, now change this to 23rd, you can see how this updates. But not only that, that if we add more dates here and we put another expense, you're going to see that this also gets updated, right? So the important part here, 2023 changes this and this. And if I change now back to 2022, everything updates accordingly. The idea, or where this is at now, because it's working in some way but still has a lot of work to do, is that you would add many of these expenses per day. For example, the parser would know about it, and then you'll be able to generate graphs of your weekly expenses or monthly expenses, how much you spent on a year, maybe filtered by tags or locations, right? So the hashes are tags and the ads are locations. So for example, here you put, right, maybe, I don't know, McDonald's. I don't recommend you to go to there, but yeah, so you could say, for example, 70 euros home appliances and at IKEA, right? So now we start adding things here. One thing that I'm also working on is if I put here January 2nd, for instance, I could put, I spent $50, right? So you can see that get converted to euros. Right now there is a fixed rate that it's not the real rate of that day, but the idea is that this rate here for conversion from USD to euros, right, from United States dollars to euros, would be the conversion rate at that date, right, on the 2nd of January of 2022. And it will change if I add the same expense somewhere else. All right, so let's actually remove these things. We had some other notes below here, and the idea is that I don't only want to do have units as euros, but we would be able to also add things like maybe kilos, right? So we could add other data here about this measurement or what it is, but the idea is that this goes to kilos, and it's actually understanding what we're writing. All right, and you can imagine that you could graph things, that you could graph like weights, or you could graph money or other things. So this is the gist of the project. This is what I wanted to communicate with this. It's open source at the moment, so you can actually clone it and start it. So you just need to clone the thing, install it, and start it, and you'll get hopefully the same thing that I have here. So what's behind the scenes here is something called the TipTap headless editor. So it's a framework that you can use to create collaborative applications. For example, I'm streaming live at none of the masses live slide 88. And so there is other people there, so the fact that this is a collaborative editing, it's just one more application of this thing. But the idea is that we can create an editor here and we can add extensions and code things and behaviors. The thing that I the thing that I want to express here is that I'm just using this because it seems it has like a nice framework for building like an intelligent, let's say, application that has to do with editing text and doing things. And there is something called extensions that I think I can use to build something what I have here on the right, because right now I have a React application that basically gets the paragraphs that are in here and tries to reverse engineer the information from them. So if I jump into that code, right? So if we go into this folder, project folder, and I start editing, I can actually put this to the side and have this here. So we actually have hot reloading for free with the setup that I have on this application. And you can actually see that if I uncomment some of this debugging code that I have. Let's see, is this working? Yeah, right. So I have some debugging code here that actually lets me play with this and change things on the code and see them, preview them instantaneously. Okay, so let's take a look at what we want to do, right? I have some parsing functions here. So if we take a look at the code, I have some files here that probably we're gonna remove at some point, but I have some utility functions here that with regular expressions, they parse whether a line belongs to a class or another type of line, as I'm calling them, right? So by the fact that this has a $sign and a number, this is going to be defined here as a USD match, right? So this is going to be USD, and then we're going to have a specific logic to parse that that line, right? We're going to say that the type is expense, the unit is dollar, and we're going to have some other things to get the value, and we're going to add that to the line items. Because on each line we can have different items. We actually have this one that has a unit and has a value and stuff, but this one is going to be a tag. This one is going to be a mention, right? So we're calling these tags and mentions, and that's going to serve to then render different things or like process the lines in different ways. Okay, so here you can see I've left a console log lines at the end of the parsing. So we can actually take a look here at what happens when I type. So when I'm typing, so if let's say we restart. So the first thing is that we have persistence. So the data that are right here is going to synchronize or like save to the browser data. So let's actually remove this and open that window again. So what you can see in here is that I'm doing some prints. I have an array of data here, and you can see that the first line is actually considered text is 2022. It's considered to be a year, and we have a few things here that we can process. The second line is indeed a break, so I consider break so that way we can know where we have to make a space, so we can make different breaks here and have multiple spaces, so the line corresponds in height with corresponding height with one another. If we do this once more, we can see we also have here a month line, right? The text is November, type is month, and here we parse that the corresponding date here is the 1st of November, because that's all we know. We know it's November and it's 2022. But if we go down to the day, we actually know that it's now the 2nd of November of 2022. So this is the data structure that I have so far in here. And this is, the idea is, for example, if you look here, 5.88 and 34 and 60 and 8.25, that's in line 87 of this utils file. That's been printed here. So for every expense, I'm printing its value, and maybe I could actually do print the value and the unit just to see a bit more information there. Now we see that these are euros, but really the original unit was dollars, right? So if we actually print this in here before we reassign, we can see that the unit is dollar, but we're expressing that or showing it here in euros because that's sort of the destination unit that we want for this cell. All right, so let's actually remove that debugging thing here. There was some temporary work that I was trying to do, so when I was editing things, I would get the height of each of these cells just to be able to replicate it on the right, because you can see that when I have multiple lines per one of these actual expense lines or node lines, the columns on the right are not moving, and you can see that TipTap actually, or in some way, what I'm doing here to get the reference of each of these paragraphs, I actually get the individual height of each of these paragraphs, and I could move the paragraphs on the right accordingly, right? But I'm actually trying to see if I do this in a different way by using TipTap Extensions. So let's take a look at TipTap Extensions here. Let me see if we can learn something. I think I did have, so I'm gonna take a look here at the Note Parser nodes that I have, like the project nodes, learning about TipTap. Okay, so let's try here on the project that we are live stream, so live 88, overview and progress, so and work session. And what I had here was like I have a placeholder extension, learning about TipTap extension to see if that's the way to display extra information for each paragraph. And we can see the code here for that placeholder extension. This is a headless wrapper, blah, blah, blah. All right, so what we can see in this placeholder extension is that we have a way to, let's take a look. So decoration node classes type of, okay, I've never actually created my own extensions here. So we can go TipTap extensions. Let's actually go and take a look at the documentation. So introduction. Here they have this placeholder extension. We can install it and configure. The default is editor empty, and then added blah, blah, blah. All right, and this is actually for the entire editor for the node. So the placeholder text adds a data placeholder attribute. Default writes something. All right, so the first thing, let's try to see if we can install the this extension and test it. So let's see what we have right now. Okay, I have some edits. I have some divs here on Git that have to do with a few different changes. So let's actually just go here to our terminal and try to follow that advice. So here, npm install TipTap Extension placeholder. So what I'm trying to do is to install some extension, any extension really, and try to understand how it works, right? So now we've installed that extension, and now the added CSS class if the editor is empty. All right, so we have different ways of configuring the extension, and here we just add, right, we import and we just add it here to our use editor extensions. So let's see where we have that on our code, use editor. Okay, so we have our code here for use editor. So we have custom extension and we have a starter kit. Let's see, custom extension. I actually had started adding here my custom code because I was starting to create a custom extension a while ago. But what we are going to do here is register my placeholder dot configure, and we're going to pass an object here. We don't have that, and what we're going to do is import placeholder from TipTap extension placeholder. Okay, and that works right now. Sounds good. Let's see if that actually did something here. Not yet. Let's restart the application. The server is breaking. Change default options, depreciated period, add options. Configure. What else do we need to do here? Placeholder. This is live 88. Right, is there something else that we need to do? Add options. Okay. Show only current. Let's try to set that to false. So the data is here. So the data placeholder is empty. Okay, so how do we make sure show only when editable false. So we can actually here go to our style sheet. So I'm gonna add a class that is called isEmpty. So we're just trying to understand this extension. So editor p is empty. We're gonna do background sea green. So I'm trying to see here why this isn't showing anything. So this is here, and it has the isEmpty class. Oh, as soon as I add some content to it, it removes the data placeholder. Why is this not showing anything? Give your user an idea what they should write with a tiny hint. There's a handful of things to customize if you feel like it. So this is telling me that it's not empty because okay, let's try this one. Write something. Okay, so this is working here, and it seems like the entire thing needs to be empty, which wouldn't probably work here because I have done here. So if the editor is empty, I actually show this menu to select a file from outside. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to try to avoid that, just to see if the extension is actually working, because I was getting really confused. So I think the drop zone, what was it? Drop zone here, or true. Okay, let's just avoid that emptiness here. All right, even if it's empty, it doesn't seem like it shows in here. Well, not sure why that's not showing, but we're gonna keep going. So I think I see a bit of the behavior of the TipTap extension in here. So let's try, if we look at the placeholder code. Placeholder options. So we define the options here of our extension create, name placeholder, add options, add ProseMirror Plugins. That's it. Okay, so we can add options and then add ProseMirror Plugins. What did we have here? How extension works, read through the pros for advanced usage, describe various concepts used in the library and how they relate to each other. To get a complete picture, it's recommended to go through it in the order it's presented, at least to the view component section. So ProseMirror provides a set of tools and concepts for building rich text editors using a user interface in parts, but what you see is what you get, but trying to avoid the pitfalls of that style of editing. The main principle of ProseMirror is that your code gets full control over the document and what happens to it. But a custom data structure that only contains elements that you explicitly allow it to contain in relation that you specified. Okay, because we're live and I know I'm gonna have to do the chapters later, I'm going to actually edit them here. That saves a lot of time later. So we get here, I think this was DALLE-2 Image API. ParametricCamp. Okay, today, so this is going to be Note Parser. This is going to be something, topics. This is going to be the latest here. It's going to be, let's do ProseMirror Plugins. I think this was Placeholder Extension, TipTap Extensions maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, this way I can edit the chapters and have them ready for later. Okay, so the core library, blah, blah, blah. The essential models are model, state, view, and transform. My first editor view, transactions, plugins. Okay, so create plugins, new editor. So this has to do new plugin. All right. Okay. Yeah, this is probably too much to understand just the ProseMirror plugin, props, new plugin, ProseMirror state. Provides the data structure, describe the editor's whole state, including selection, transaction system. Editor state, doc selection, store marks, schema plugins. All right, and okay, so for those of you who are online, I'll say you can like this video if you want to let me know if this is the type of content you want to keep on seeing, and make sure to subscribe if you want to get notified when I go live next, and click on that bell so you also get when I upload new videos. And I would really appreciate if you leave a comment on the chat if you let us know where you're connecting from and whether this topic interests you. All right. Okay, so let's keep going here. We have this example extension. So what I want to do is, so let's get back here at TipTap, creating a TipTap extension. All right, so here I do have examples. So here we go back to extensions. Yeah, there's a ton of extensions. What I want to do is develop my own. But what I was thinking is that we find, if we find an extension that relates to the functionality that I want to create, then we're going to be able probably to edit it and simply have it edited or create a similar one. Not done, procrastinate. Okay, so hashtag, what does this mean? Oh, so this is not done. Okay. So for example, they have heading and the extension is here, right? So you can set different levels. Right slightly above the normal line to show your just next level. Right slightly below to show you're unique. Strike. So these are all features that are really useful for a rich text editor, and I'm not sure we're gonna find something as I'm looking for. Useless extension just adds a span tags required extension though. Text style. This has a span tag without a style attribute, so it's thrown away. But this one is wrapped in a span tag with an inline style attribute, so it's kept even if it's empty for now. All right, let's read here. Text style, remove empty text style, remove span tags with an inline. Okay, commands. Okay, so if we inspect this, we see that this span gets deleted, but this one doesn't. Okay. How is that done? I'm not sure. All I want to do, so I define a bit here what my intention is that I want this part here on the right. So these things that we're showing here, these are all things that I'm adding, let's say by hand, from the information that I read or parse from the editor. So if I go back to our code, where can I show that? So that is, let me actually see lines.map, I think. Yeah, in display. So this is what I'm calling the display. So if I were to edit something here, so for example, instead of this, I just put a slash, you can see that all of these change to a slash, right? So our component that has the logic for this display is actually getting the from its props. It understands that it's going to have a prop that is called lines, and we just pass that from above. So this is our display, which we can actually see in the app. So the display is a component that we're gonna get the lines to. There's no input here and it's not editable. So this is our display. Let's see, we can go back there. And yeah, this is just a component that shows the get line summary, get line weight. Yeah, this is not used at the moment here. Okay. Eunice Fach. Yeah, so Thanks. I'm glad that you're enjoying. This is actually quite a different live stream from what I usually do. We have usually the topics are more around podcasting or machine learning and artificial intelligence. But today I sort of have a like a free day from work, and I actually wanted to see if I could take some time for some side projects. And I thought that maybe doing these projects online makes me crunch my brain or like focus more. So I usually don't tend to get distracted while I'm doing these things live. So it's a good exercise to just go live. You know that people might be watching or that this is going to be there later. So I'm going to try to do the most progress and crunch a bit my mind to get and solve this problem. Well, thanks for your comment actually. All right, so documentation, we're gonna go again to the API here. So this is the API is extensions add new capabilities to TipTap, and you'll read the word extension here very often. Actually, there are literal extensions. Those can't add to the schema, but can add functionality or change the behavior of the editor. There are also some extensions with more capabilities. We call them nodes and marks, which can render content in the editor. Okay, so these are literal extensions. And then they say there are also some extensions with more capabilities. We call them nodes and marks, which can render content in the editor. So maybe this is what we need. Maybe this is what we want to do instead of what we're trying right now. Let's actually close other stuff. So we're gonna read about marks and nodes. All right, so here I'm gonna do another section. All right, so we're gonna call this all right, so let's take a look at TipTap nodes. Well, one second. First, before I do this, I also see that Prasad Saloke is here on the chat. So they're saying, let me see if I can pull the YouTube chat here. Don't remember how this was popping other times. Here's the chat, right? Okay, and can I make this bigger? Okay, so if I zoom in here, because otherwise you won't see anything. Prasad Salok said 8 podcasting tips were really helpful. Yeah, thanks so much. It makes me happy to hear that that was useful, and I might do similar content in the near future. And yeah, okay, so let me create one more marker there, maybe here. So okay, let's take a look at TipTap nodes. This is the first time that I look at this, and we're gonna see if this is what we need to add content on some of these nodes that we have here. Each of these lines, not necessarily the lines, but each of these blocks is a node, as TipTap calls them. So if I get rid of this and I add some even padding to these ones, each of these that you can see is a node, right? So if I do this, you can see that the node, even if it's multi-line, it keeps that sense of one node because it has its own, let's say, box, right? Right now, these are all paragraphs. I can probably do something like this, and we don't have an outline because I'm just targeting here the editor piece, but I could do here editor H2s, and then say, okay, the border now is going to be solid blue violet outline. And then we got that, right? And you can see it, there is some other things that I put here for the paragraphs and so on and so forth, right? So, but let's not get lost on that at the moment. We want to render something inside of that node. So let's take a look. Introduction, list of supported nodes, and create a new node. If you think of the document as a tree, then nodes are just a type of content in that tree. Examples of nodes are paragraphs, headings, or code blocks, but nodes don't have to be blocks. They can also be rendered in line with the text, for example, at mentions. So nodes don't have to be blocks. Examples of nodes are paragraphs, headings, or code blocks, but nodes don't have to be blocks. That means that there might be a node that is inside of another node, I guess, or a block. They can also be rendered in line with the text. For example, at mentions. List of supported nodes. We have the block quote, the bullet, the code block, document, emoji, heartbreak, hashtag, heading, horizontal rule, list item, mention, order list, paragraph, text. All right, so these are nodes, and I believe this might not be what we need. Custom node, node create your code here. Custom node, register your custom node with the editor. Learn more about custom extensions in our guide. All right, custom extensions guide. Here we found it. And now we're going to take a look at TipTap Marks briefly to see what they are. So the introduction and list of supported marks. One or multiple marks can be applied to nodes, for example, to add inline formatting like bold and italic, or other additional information. This might be what I'm looking for, and we're going to take a look. So we have bold, code, highlight, italic, link, strike, subscript, superscript, text style, underline. These are all marks that seem to be just modifying the existing text or formatting it in some way. It might not be what I need, but let's take a look and read. So here I mention again to ProseMirror. So TipTap is a headless wrapper around ProseMirror, blah 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 blah, which is already in use at many well-known companies such as New York Times. Regarding our relation, documentation can be found on the TipTap website. Okay, so there's no readmes for this. Here we just export the file, and here we have mark input rule, mark base rule, mark merge attributes, highlight options, module TipTap core, commands, return type, highlight, set highlight, toggle highlight, blah blah blah, input regex. All right, so this is really nice because let's see if we have that here. Like usually the mark is like, this is some text inside of a node, I think. Can I do this? Maybe this highlights extension is not included. Twinkle sign magic run for highlighted text when you're typing. Okay. Usage. All right. So, but that one is, here is some text that I'm going to highlight right now. All right. So what if we now okay, so if we look here, we probably see a mark. So that's a mark. And okay, just a question here, so Prasad, if you are still online, what do you like about 8 podcasting tips, about that podcast episode? So we go to the Getting Simple podcast, you can find this one here, right? So Q&A with Nono, how to start a podcast. This is a podcast episode about how I do podcasting or some of my thoughts. And I believe the essay that Prasad is talking about is 8 podcasting tips that are here, right? So 8 bullet points of things that help me think about podcasting or make it better. Okay, so this is some text. So we don't have the highlight extension here, so we could install it, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. So here we see the text. So this is how the text starts, and this is wrapping with a mark, like with HTML tag, right? So bold, code, italic, these are all things that wrap the text. So if we look at superscript, for example, so if we do here 62 meters square and we look at this code, it's going to be similar. It's going to be a sub, right? Instead of mark, it's sub. But if we, if we were to do something like this, that extension is not installed here, so it doesn't work. But yeah, so set superscript, blah, 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 and set superscript. Okay, so this adds those HTML tags to the selected text. All right, style vertical align, tag sub, don't match this rule in the vertical line isn't super, sub, render HTML, sub, merge attributes, this option HTML attributes, add commands, set mark, toggle mark, and set mark. Okay, so marks are, okay. So I can see how to make the marks. So the mark extensions seem to be fairly easy, straightforward. And I see you can also append, well, not append, attach some modifier. One second here. Okay, great. So let's move on now to custom extensions. And I'm gonna take a really quick break, a water break, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I'm here, I'm back. Let's actually just move to this. And yeah, I'm here talking on the chat with Prasad. So he's saying that when he read the title of 8 podcasting tips, or like the episode, he thought that I would outline the production side or what topics to pick, but to my surprise, it was related to building the relationship with the guest and equally focusing on the people. Was that a good surprise or was that a bad surprise? I know that, I thought after releasing that episode that how to create or how to start a podcast is a bit more generic or more general, requires a lot more thinking probably. That's a first approach. It was an informal episode that we recorded, was a Q&A that I did with Steve, and we can actually cover more of those topics if you guys are interested. I'm open to answer any questions about podcasting, about how I do it, the tools I use, and really anything. So anything that I can help with or I can share, like that would be interesting, I can do. So just let me know and we can take a look at that. All right, so let's go back to custom extensions on TipTap. So we're going to take a look at how to build them. And here, and we haven't still coded any custom extensions, right? So there is extensive documentation, but it is a bit confusing with nodes, marks, extensions, and like existing extensions and the things that you can do. It's a bit confusing to actually understand the things that you can do with the TipTap extensions that are provided, or the ones that you can build. So let's actually go through and read through this documentation to see if we understand anything, right? The sections that we have here are mainly the introduction and extending existing extensions, and then also create new extensions. All right, so let's actually jump to create new extensions just to see, because this is the part that I was more interested in, right? If you can build your own extensions from scratch, and you know what? It's the same syntax for extending existing extensions described above. Create a node. If you think of the document as a tree, then nodes are just the type of content in the tree. Good examples to learn from are paragraph, heading, or code block. Nodes don't have to be blocks. They can also be rendered in line. This is what we read before. Create a mark. One or multiple marks can be applied to nodes. For example, to add inline formatting, good examples to learn from are bold, italic, or highlight. Create an extension. Extensions add new capabilities to TipTap, and you'll read the word extension here very often, even for nodes and marks. But there are literal extensions. Those can't add to the schema like marks or nodes do, but can add functionality or change the behavior of the editor. All right, so a good example to learn from is probably text align. Okay, so this is create an extension. Text align seems to be a good extension example to learn from, but I'm not too sure of whether this is going to be what we're looking for. But again, we're going to take a look. A list of nodes. Okay, so this extension adds a text align attribute to a specified list of nodes. The attribute is used to align the text. Text align attribute to specified list of node. The attribute is used, okay, justified, for example, Firefox back. Doesn't work together with whitepage pre-wrap. npm install extension text align, a list of nodes where the text align attribute should be applied to, usually something like heading or paragraph. Text align configure, heading, paragraph. Okay, so we're adding these types and then alignments left and right. A list of available options for the text align attribute. The default text align, set align, and set. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so this is adding a style, I guess, to the okay, text align TS, another extension here. So we get the types, the alignments, and the default alignment that we were seeing before. We see that we declare the model TipTap core interface command return type, and then we do text align, set the text align attribute, and then return type and set. We create the extension with the text align options that are defined here as type here as an interface, and then the name is text align. We add the options, types, it's an array, an empty, alignments, then the options here, default is left. Add global attributes. Types, these option types, attributes, text align, default, these options, default alignment, parse HTML, element, style align. If attributes text align, these options equals default alignment, do nothing, return otherwise, style text align, blah blah blah. All right, so render HTML style. Okay, so here is for the options are going to be rendered there, but can we actually, this is just touching the okay, in because this is live and this is the only thing that we get that is different from when I simply do a video on my own. I'm gonna keep interacting with the chat, so we would like to be really interested in how you prepare yourself for any podcast and how your approach changes from guest to guest, if it does. Yeah, this is actually something that I could talk about. I'm gonna keep it in mind. Maybe I can do it at the end of this live stream before I go. I can talk about that, but let's keep pushing just a bit here on this investigation to see if I can discover how to do this with TipTap, so we can actually get to solve this issue, or learn how to do custom extensions that do what we want to do. So if you look here, if we look at the DOM of the document object model here, you can see that this actually has that text align property, and I could, I could go see the heights. Okay, I could select, so this is first paragraph, so I could say here unset, and then that disappears from here, so we don't have the text align. But if I select it again, I can do right, and then that node will get that style there. So I wonder now, so trying to understand what is going on here, I wonder what we can return here on render HTML. So render HTML. Let's actually go here into render HTML. With the render HTML, you can control how an extension is rendered to HTML. We pass an attribute object to it. With all local attributes, go out to and configure CS classes. Here's an example from the bold extension. Return strong HTML attributes 0. Why HTML attributes strong? The first value in the array should be the name of the HTML tag. If the second element is an object, it's interpreted as a set of attributes. Any elements after that are rendered as children. All right, the number 0 representing a hole is used to indicate where the content should be inserted. Let's look at the rendering content code block. Extension with 2 nested tags. So we go pre code, blah, blah, blah. All right, so the content is actually rendered here, and in here is inside of the Okay, so maybe this is worth taking a look at. And I'm gonna make an effort and actually go through and read through this section. One of the strengths of TipTap is its extendability. You don't depend on the provided extension. It is intended to extend the editor to your liking. With custom extensions, you can add new content types, new functionalities on top of what already exists or from scratch. Let's start with a few common examples of how you can extend existing nodes, marks, and extensions. You learn how you start from scratch at the end, but you'll need the same knowledge for extending existing and creating new extensions. You learn how you start from scratch at the end, but you'll need the same knowledge for extending existing and creating new extensions. All right, extend existing extensions. Every extension has an extend method, which takes an object with everything you want to change or add to it. Let's say you'd like the keyboard shortcut for the bullet list. You want to change it, right? You should start with looking at the source code of the extension, in that case, the bullet list node. For the bespoke example, to override the keyboard shortcut to your code could look like that. All right, so import bullet list from TipTap extension bullet list. Override the keyboard shortcuts. So custom bullet list extend, add keyboard shortcuts, return blah blah blah. All right, add the custom extension to your editor, and that's it. The same applies to every aspect of an existing extension except to the name. Let's look at all the things that you can change through the extend method. We focus on one aspect in every example, but you can combine all those examples and change multiple aspects in one extend call too. Name. The extension name is used in a whole lot of places, and changing it isn't too easy. If you want to change the name of an existing extension, you can copy the whole extension and change the name in all occurrences. The extension name is also part of the JSON. If you store your content as JSON, you need to change the name there too. Priority. The priority defines the order in which extensions are registered. The default priority is 100. That's the most what most extensions have. Extensions with a higher priority will be loaded earlier. The order in which extensions are loaded influences two things. Plugin order. ProseMirror plugins of extensions with a higher priority will run first. Schema order. The link mark, for example, has a high priority, which means it will be rendered as instead of. Okay. All right, so more outer, the more priority. Settings. All settings can be configured through the extension anyway. But if you want to change the default settings, for example, to provide a library on top of TipTap for other developers, you can do it like that. To provide a library on top of TipTap for developers, extension heading. Custom heading extend, add options, return this parent 1, 2, 3. I don't understand what this means. Return this parent, levels 1, 2, 3. Okay. Storage. At some point, you probably want to save some data within your extension instance. The data is mutable. You can access it within the extension under this storage. Extension, custom extension, create, return awesomeness, this storage awesomeness +1. All right, outside the extension, you have access via editor.storage. Make sure that each extension has a unique name. Okay. So this storage might be good. So maybe one thing that we can do is save. Let's take a screenshot. So storage. All right, so let's put this here. What if line data is stored in TipTap's storage. Okay. All right, so I'll just leave this here so we have some reference to this note. And let's keep going. So that was storage, and then we have schema. TipTap works with a strict schema, which configures how the content can be structured, nested, how it behaves, and many more things. You can change all aspects of the schema for existing extensions. Let's walk through a few common use cases. The default block quote extension can wrap other nodes like headings. If you want to allow nothing but paragraphs in your block quotes, set the content attribute accordingly. Schema even allows to make your nodes draggable. That's what the draggable option is for. It defaults to false, but you can override that. That's just two tiny examples, but the underlying ProseMirror schema is really powerful. Okay, TipTap works with a strict schema, which configures can change all aspects of the schema for existing extensions. Content inline group, inline tag parse DOM. So there are three nodes here: doc, paragraph, and text. Doc, paragraph, and text. Doc is the root node, which allows one or more blocks as a children. Content block plus. Since paragraph is in the group of block nodes, group block, our node can only contain paragraphs. Paragraphs allow 0 or more inline nodes as children, content inline. So there can only be text in it. Parse DOM defines how a node can be parsed from paste HTML to DOM defines how it will be rendered in the DOM. In TipTap, every node, mark, and extension is living in its own file. This allows us to split the logic. Under the hood, the whole schema will be merged together. Nodes are like blocks of content. For example, paragraphs, heading, code blocks, and many more. Marks can be applied to specific parts of a node. That's the case for bold, italics, right text. Links are marks too. The node schema. The content attribute defines exactly what kind of content the node can have. ProseMirror is really strict with that. That means content which doesn't fit the schema is thrown away. It expects a name or a group as a string. Here are a few examples. Node create. One or more blocks. Must have 0 or more blocks. Allows all kinds of inline context. Must not have anything else than text. Can have one or more paragraphs or lists if lists are used. Must have exactly one heading at the top and one or more blocks below. Marks. You can define which marks are allowed inside of a node with the mark setting of the schema. Add one or more names or groups of marks allow all or disallow all marks like this. All right, group, add this node to a group of extensions which can be referred to in the content attribute. All right. Not sure. ProseMirror Atom. True when this is when it does not have directly development. This is usually the same as isLeaf, but can be configured. isLeaf. This is true when it's a leaf node. Leaf node TipTap. Let's see. Maybe that's what it is. Node views with React. See, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here we're getting into a different territory. Create a node extension, create a Here's what you need to do to render React components at your editor. Create a node extension. Create a React component, pass a component to provide render React node view render, register it with add node view, configure TipTap to use your new node extension. Okay, I think this is what we might need. React component. All right. Great. Okay. So where we're at, let me do a time check. Okay. So if you guys are online still, say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're connecting from. We're continuing to take a look at TipTap and this text editor, web text editor based on React or Vue. And let me see. This is still the text editor you're used to, but enriched with node views. So there is a React component here. Let's see where this React component is. So if we take a look here, So here we have the editor. There is here a paragraph, and here we have another paragraph. Here we have a React component that is being rendered inside of TipTap, but this is likely specified in code, right? So here, React component count 0, but I'm not sure how that will work if we want to get information of the parent node and render it, right? Because the idea would be that this React component is inside of this paragraph node, and it would be able to get its text to display here or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure if what we want to do is the right way to do this. All right, so we were reading the custom extensions text here. Okay, attributes. You can use attributes to store additional information in the content. Let's say you want to extend the default paragraph node to have different colors. Okay, that is already enough to tell TipTap about the new attribute and set pink as the default value. All attributes will be rendered as HTML attribute by default and parsed from the content when initiated. Let's stick with the color example and assume you want to add an inline style to actually color the text. With the render HTML function, you can return HTML attributes which will be rendered in the output. Okay. You can also control how the attribute is parsed from the HTML. Maybe you want to store the color in an attribute called data color and not just color. Here's how you would do that. Data color, attributes, blah, 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 style, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You can completely disable the rendering of attributes with rendered false. Extend existing attributes. If you want to add an attribute to an extension and keep existing attributes, you can access through this parent. In some cases, it is undefined, so make sure to check for that case or use optional chaining. This parent dot blah blah blah, custom attribute, blah blah blah. Okay, global attributes. Attributes can be applied to multiple extensions at once. That's useful for text alignment, line height, color, font family, and other styling. So global attributes, render HTML. With the render HTML, you can control how an extension is rendered to HTML. We pass an attributes object to it with all local attributes, global attributes, blah blah blah. HTML attributes. The first value in the array should be the name of the HTML tag. If the second element is an object, it's interpreted as a set of attributes. Any elements after that are rendered as children. The number 0 representing a whole is used to indicate where the content should be inserted. Let's look at the rendering of the code block. If you want to add some specific attributes here, import the merge attributes helper. If you want to add some specific attributes here, import the merge attributes helper. Okay. Parse HTML. The parse HTML function tries to load the editor document from HTML. The function gets the HTML DOM pass as a parameter and is expected to return an object with attributes and their values. Here's a simplified example from the bold mark. This is for strong and B tags and any HTML tag with an inline style setting the font weight to bold. As you can see, you can actually pass a get attributes callback to add more complex checks, blah, 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 using get attributes. Commands, all right. Use the commands parameter inside of add commands. To access the commands inside add commands, use the commands parameter passed to it. Keyboard shortcuts. Okay, change the bullet list keyboard shortcut. Import bullet list from TipTap extension bullet list, custom bullet list. Yeah, okay, so we did this input rules. When input rules can be defined, they're used to mark and, for example, convert text like with the typography extension, use the mark input rule helper to function for marks and the node input rule. Paste rules, events, on create, selection, on transaction, on focus, on blur, on destroy. All right, so this is nice. What's available in this? Those extensions are in classes, but you still have important things available in this everywhere in the extension. Name, editor, type, options, and parent. ProseMirror Plugins. After all, TipTap is built on ProseMirror, and ProseMirror has a pretty powerful plugin API too. To access that directly, use @ProseMirror Plugins. You can wrap existing ProseMirror plugins in TipTap extensions like shown in the example below. Right, access the ProseMirror API to hook into events, for example, a click, double click, or when content is pasted, you can pass event handlers to editor props on the editor, or you can add them to a TipTap extension like shown in the example below. Node views. For advanced use cases where you need to execute JavaScript inside your nodes, for example, to render sophisticated interface around an image, you need to learn about node views. They are really powerful, but also complex. In a nutshell, you need to return a parent DOM element and a DOM element where the content should be rendered in. Look at the following simplified example. This might be more like what we want. Node views. Task item node. All right, so this is a good case because it's actually getting the text that we're writing, but also has this content editable false. So what we could do is that we could try to modify this extension in order to render something here that has to do with this text. So let's say we render the text twice, or maybe we reverse it, or something that we do that manipulating this text. We can actually do things to that text to. All right, so I'm gonna leave it in here. So I'm gonna put this. Also as a screenshot here, because this might be more similar to what we need. And I'm going to just make a screenshot here and Okay, so this extension renders, let me see what we have here. This extension renders a task item list element, which is a lead tag with a data type attribute set to task item. It also renders a checkbox inside the list element, which updates a checked attribute. This extension doesn't require any JavaScript framework. It's based on vanilla JavaScript. We don't even need any JavaScript. We just need a like an object inside of our paragraph. It may not need to be a paragraph actually. Okay, so task item options. On read only checked, nested, HTML attributes. Task item node create, task item options, task item add return, this option nested, add attributes checked. This is a task item, okay. Render HTML. Okay, so now I understand. So here we have a list element that is going to contain another element here. It's going to contain two elements. So that's what I'm showing here. So this li, this list, is going to contain this label and this div. So it's this label and this div, because this label is here. And this one contains this. So, okay. All right. So we have, or I have found a way that is worth, like a path that is worth experimenting or like looking for. So we have the code here, and we're gonna put this link here. Task item, make this smaller. We'll check this next time when we continue working on this. Let's actually just put this here. Okay. Okay, so that we have here, and just a note. Let's task. So task item is a good example. So task item is a good example of a node view with custom child components. Okay, so we need to create a custom node view just to see if that solves our, or like it ends our search for what I'm trying to do, to see if we can customize these things. The question, I guess, would be if instead of these, where is it? In here, if I can actually write some content. If I can put this 0 into places, or if I can modify that node. Would like to see node properties, but it's getting late, so I'm gonna finalize here the let's say the spike. I have a question here. All right, so let's move now into this Q&A. 1 second. Okay, so we have here this section. So this comment. Okay, so we're wrapping up today's live stream. I have here a question or a comment from Prasad Saloke on the chat, and it says, we would be really interested in how you prepare yourself before any podcast and how your approach changes from guest to guest, if it does. So this is a really quick Q&A. Let's say you've sent the question there and I'm answering here live because I like to help as much as possible there. So I guess that we could do a more in-depth response to this. We don't need to just limit ourselves to today, but how I prepare myself, it's actually not trivial. Like I would say there are 2 or 3 main, let me see, 1, 2, yeah, it's like 2 main episode types that I do. And if we break them down, there are 4. The first subdivision would be solo episodes or episodes with some other person, with a guest. And then inside of solo episodes, there are ones that I do that I read stuff that I had written before, maybe like a publication of an essay or some other writings, or something that is an episode that I want to communicate something that maybe I might have an outline, either a set of bullet points or a completely written script. It's like if I read it exactly, that would be the transcript of the episode, but scripts always serve as a guide, so it's open to interpretation. So for these 2 types of podcast episodes, for the first one, what I do is I would have published or written some piece of text and I try to read it, interpreting it in a way that the audience, like the listener of the podcast, can listen to that episode, or let's say can listen to that episode instead of reading the essay. So this would be as an audiobook. So you are listening to a piece of text read by me, which is actually available as publication, like a writing piece online. The second solo episode type would be a bit different. Would be me setting a set of bullet points of things or key ideas that I want to communicate, and then improvising and talking as I am right now to explain some set of ideas and share them with the audience. Or the other way would be that I have a full-fledged script, as I said before, in which I try to cover almost everything that I want to communicate. So that gives you a lot more peace of mind, because you know that everything that you want to communicate in that episode is written there. And you have some room, as much as you want, to improvise if you're doing this offline, because you can re-record, you can come up with new ideas as you go, you can edit later, or you can even improvise if you're doing that live. So that would be for the first block, episodes that I do on my own. And then later, episodes that I do with a guest. Sometimes these are guests that are friends or people who I collaborate with more often, like Jose Luis Garcia del Castillo or Assis Barbar, or some other people that have been in the podcast a few times. We know each other, it's more relaxed. Maybe we set a set of bullet points, maybe each of us prepare some things that want to be covered on the podcast, and we either do this as a live thing on YouTube, streaming, or offline. So we can record, we can then edit, and then we can release. And then the last type of podcast, which is the one that I aim for the most, is actually having personalities that I admire, whose work I like or follow or try to replicate in some way. And I have to first find a way to book an interview with them. This is something that I covered on the how to start a podcast episode that I mentioned before in this live stream. And you can actually listen here at gettingsimple.com or on YouTube on my channel. It's a 33-minute episode, and we cover many of these things, which I'm not going to talk too in detail today about, but it's really helpful if you're like thinking of getting started with a podcast. It doesn't cover everything. That's why I'm answering this question today. So the process for me to make an interview with a guest also has different modalities. One of them is, so the first thing is you need to get a hold of them somehow, so you can expose why you are actually trying to get them into your show, tell them what the show is. It really helps if you have people that they know or that they can know of on your show as a reference to say, okay, I already interviewed this and this other person that you know, and maybe that gives them some feeling like, oh, this might be a good fit for me. If that doesn't happen, maybe you can find some commonalities between the work that they do and the interest that you have or the conversation you want to have on the podcast. Then the other thing that I would say is sometimes I have really few time to prepare, say hours or maybe a few days or just a day, because I have booked somebody and say, okay, do you want to record a podcast? And then they say yes, but I don't have time to prepare. So I quickly try to put a lot of bullet points with like questions that I've done in other podcasts that are more generic, or also research a bit what they do. So I get together a set of things that I know that would be interesting to discuss with them. Also things that they might know of that I'm interested in personally, that I'm writing about, that I'm working on, that I am trying to improve. For example, teaching. If somebody I know that I'm interviewing is teaching a lot, I ask them about that. How did they start? How do they get better? What formats they experiment with, or things like that, right? So there is like a different time frame. Maybe I get hours, or maybe I get days or months to prepare an interview, but the process is always really similar. I open an Notion document in this case right now. Before it would be like just a text document or a markdown document or Dropbox paper, and I try to structure writing there, and try to structure the interview according to different topics. An introduction, what are the first questions I'm going to do? What topic blocks do I want to talk about? Do I want to talk about sketching, about writing, about programming, about visual programming, about cryptocurrencies? You break down into blocks, so you try to group all the questions and the topics in different sections. And for me to get peace of mind if I have time, so for example, for people like Andrew Witt or Leire Asensio and David Mann, that they actually send me, or I bought their book or send me an advance copy so I could read that before the interview, or also Scott H. Young with Ultra Learning, I would actually go through the entire book or as much as I can to cover, take a lot of notes, and then select topics that collide between my own research and interest and their research or their work. And I would have a thorough set of questions, like sometimes maybe 4 sheets, like 4 sides of an A4 like letter size paper with questions and an organized interview outline, right? What this does to me is I can start kind of marking down. I print them physically, so I don't have to be dealing with a computer or an iPad during the interview, and I print them on paper, so I can strike through or like check some of the questions or topics that we've covered, and some of them I actually ask, and some others just fluently because they're related to other topics that I've covered on the show. They come up and the guest maybe informally talks about them, so I mark them, right? So I usually have like a linear temporal phase that I would like to cover on the episode, but it's always really hard to do this linearly unless you're like directing exactly a conversation where you want it to go, and instead of letting the guest just diverge and go wherever they want to go. So for me, I like the latter, and what I try to do is that I cross off things that I've asked or things that the guest has talked about, and I usually go from page to page, like leaving some topics that don't fit a lot on the moment and might relate later more to other conversations, or jump from, I sometimes I improvise and maybe I might jump to a different page or like to the end of the interview that I thought it was going to be the end of the interview, and I ask really early if the topic is coming up already in the conversation and I feel that it's a better fit, right? So usually my goal is that at least like 70% of the things that I thought I was going to talk about, I talk about. I always leave the things that I feel don't fit on the conversation out, but at least I get a really good idea of what's going on. And one thing that I did as of late, when I got this Stream Deck device that allows me to create an entire page for my markers, right? So if I show you, actually, if I show you here, right? So this page of the Stream Deck is dedicated markers that I can use as I'm recording. So what this will do is that as I press some of these buttons, it will go into a text file and add a timestamp on the time of the conversation that I'm talking, to signal new sections, links, things that I want to link to that have been mentioned, maybe a person, when there is like a mistake, a cough, or things I might have to edit, or to signal parts of the conversation. I also have this setup. So for example, you can see I move to the right or to the left or to the full page here. If I click on these different buttons on the Stream Deck, this allows me to control what's going on, and things that are basically really efficient to do while you're on the conversation, but that you might not want to have to write by hand or do other things that distract you. So for example, I will click on section, but I won't write what the section is actually about. I could actually go into the file, the text file, and edit these markers by hand as the thing is going, as I can do right now here. So for example, I can copy here the what we're talking about is how a Q&A, how do you prepare for podcast interviews. How I prepare for podcast interviews, right? And this now would be a chapter on today's live stream, and that actually gave me the advantage that when I finish this live stream, I can copy paste the chapters and I don't have to work back through the video and actually create those markers, right? So in an interview, if you're going to be recording for 1 or 2 hours, it's really easy to just like leave that and then come back to that interview months later and have to revisit the entire episode in order to reverse engineer where those topic changes are, what they are, and it's so much easier to do it as you're recording. Mark where the sections are, and right after you record, go through and try to name those so you know what's going on. If you have somebody else external that is going to be editing the entire thing, maybe just by telling them the markers where there's a mistake, where's the section, and all these things, that can help you. Here, credit to Jason Snell, who was actually the person from which I learned that this could be done easily. And I'm not sure if he uses a Stream Deck, but for sure he has a script with shortcuts or something. So he creates also timestamps as I'm doing here. I'm doing here with OBS, but in the case of the podcast, I will be doing with Audio Hijack. And yeah, I think this covers more or less what is here on the question that Prasad did on the chat. Remember that you can send also questions to getting simple.com/ask via video or voice note that you record with your phone or your computer. I personally think that from guest to guest, it changes. So Prasad asked, like, how does my approach change from guest to guest? It really depends if I know the person, if the topics are really clear, if it's somebody who I've never talked to before, or if I have already caught up with them. And one thing that I don't want to forget, if I do an episode on my own, of course, I do the script on my own, maybe check with somebody, but usually just do it on my own. And many times I borrow from my writing, from the things that I'm already working on and things like this. But if I am interviewing somebody, especially somebody who I have never met, I try to do 1 or 2 calls beforehand to discuss potential topics with the guests, so I know what they might be interested about talking and what they might contribute to the topics that I'm trying to cover on my own research and my own work. Sometimes I do that call, so I get my own notes and I organize later with the things I thought and the things they said and some things that I find on the internet. And sometimes if the person is going to be more relaxed or maybe they have more time to prepare, I might even send them the list of things that we might talk about, because that way, that way they're a bit more ready for what we're going to talk about. But in some instances, it's so much more interesting to just see how the guests improvise and they don't know from beforehand all of the things that we're going to talk about, because many times that also gives you a sense that you have a chance to prepare, that you've prepared, and that you come already with preconceived things that you want to say. And people get even more nervous if they don't say the things that they wanted to say because they've forgotten. So yeah, it really depends on who's your guest and what the setting and the topic on the conversation is. I have to say, if you can do these interviews in person, it's so much better. I feel like maintaining eye contact with the person you're talking to, it's so much easier than looking like I'm doing right now to a camera lens, and it drains your energy a lot less and allows the guest to go without getting tired and yourself for more hours. I'm able to record for 3 or 4 hours in person, but I would get really tired if I'm recording for 3 hours in the computer remotely, right? So yeah, I think this answers the question that we got from Prasad. Remember that you can submit your own questions to gettingsimple.com/ask or to the chat on any video or Discord or on the live chat. It's preferable to send it through gettingsimple.com/ask and to the YouTube chat, because that way we can cover it either live or maybe record later for the podcast and maybe release an episode. Honestly, I'm tempted now to gather some of the thoughts that I put here, the ones that were on the post and on the episode, and continue growing knowledge to create a new episode where I summarize all these things on how I try to cope with like interviewing guests and how I think about all this process. Let me actually do one thing. I'm gonna open here, if I can find it quickly, what was my last interview on the podcast. So if I go here to gettingsimple.com/podcast, Leire Asensio, Frank Harmon. So for example, if I look here to Frank Harmon's episode, let me take a look at the notes. So what we have here is a document with the notes that I prepared, and then I got to record the interview and also to release the interview, right? So in my interview notes, I actually had sections, as I said before. So questions before we start, writing, writing tips, sketching, and here signal that this one I didn't record because we covered this on a previous call, and I have this pending, so I recorded the episode and I didn't get the chance because we had restricted amount of time to record this part. So it's a potential for a future interview, and also these ones, right? So we covered live, book and newsletter, his drawing as a way to see book, and sketching. And I would, as I said before, I would print these things in sheets. So I'm gonna let me actually find really quickly where that is printed, and I'll show you before we wrap up. So I have here, if we say Frank, do we have this? Where might this be? Frank Harmon. Notes. All right. Yeah, I think I get it here. Okay. All right, so these here are the notes I had. So you see this page number 1. So I had an intro for the podcast, the start notes, and then a set of grouped questions, as I mentioned before, and a checkbox. So these would be useful to check after we've talked about a given topic. I could check it, so I know I don't have to look at that anymore, and I can move on onto other things. And yeah, so that for how I try to prepare interviews and talk to guests, and I hope that was useful. So let me go here, this. Okay, so it was let me see where this is. Okay, so yeah, so this was one more week of the live stream. It's Nono Martinez Alonso here. Remember that you can like this video and subscribe and click on the bell if you want to get notified when I go live next or when I upload new videos. And make sure you share this with your peers if you like any of the parts on the video today, and leave me a comment on the videos comments or on Discord, and let me know what you would like to see next on the channel and on the live stream. I'm gonna take this last chance, in case you're there, that I'm gonna show you the new videos that we've released on the channel. This live is the one that is going on right now, and we have released this video on how to find voice memos on Mac, this one on how to get TensorFlow up and running in like between 3 and 5 minutes, and some other videos that are being released. How to start a podcast is the latest episode, Larry Ascension, David Mai is the previous one. And yeah, so we're trying to get videos out every week, podcasts out every month, and weekly live streams. I'm not super consistent on when they happen still, but we have a good setup right now, and I think we're going in the right direction. So yeah, thanks a lot again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.